A 69-year-old black woman, once Chief Justice, arrested, framed, and humiliated. The cops planted drugs, and the media spread lies. But what they didn't know was that Evelyn Monroe had the truth, and a team ready to burn their empire to the ground. Before we dive into this shocking story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you're into thrilling, gripping stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. The hum of gospel music filled the cabin of Dr. Evelyn Monroe's silver sedan as it glided beneath the streetlights of downtown Charlotte. The city's skyline shimmered against the ink-black sky, its glass towers casting reflections that flickered across the hood of her car like silent applause for the woman behind the wheel. At 69, Evelyn embodied grace, a woman carved from struggle. Her silver hair coiled neatly, and her deep brown eyes were steady, just like the steady cadence of Mahalia Jackson's voice that wrapped around her like armor. She had just finished delivering a keynote speech at a civil rights gala, reminding the next generation of the battles fought and the victories yet to be won. She smiled faintly, the warmth of the standing ovation still lingering in her chest. Her hands, worn but steady, gripped the steering wheel, each wrinkle a testament to decades of navigating justice in a world eager to deny it to women who looked like her. But then, flashing lights. Blue. Red. Blue again. Their strobes sliced through the melody of the car's speakers, snapping her out of her reverie. Evelyn's heart gave a slow, measured thump as she checked her speed. 5 under the limit. Signals obeyed. No infraction. But it didn't matter, did it? Not for her. She signaled and pulled over smoothly to the curb, exhaling a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. She rolled down the window, letting the cool night air slip inside. The police cruiser door creaked open, and out stepped Captain Ryan Mercer. Young, white, cocky. The kind of man whose badge seemed heavier on black skin. His eyes skimmed the sleek contours of Evelyn's car, then narrowed with smug certainty that she didn't belong there. License and registration, he barked, his hand resting on his duty belt as if it might leap free on its own. Certainly, officer, Evelyn replied, her voice calm and layered with a practiced politeness she had earned from too many encounters like this. She moved slowly, deliberately, reaching for her leather clutch on the passenger seat. Mercer's tone sharpened like a blade unsheathed. What's the rush, ma'am? Keep those hands where I can see them. Evelyn froze, her heartbeat quickening beneath her composed exterior. I'm complying, officer. My registration is right here. But Mercer was already leaning in, his flashlight glaring into her eyes. Blinding, invasive. What are you doing out here this late, ma'am? Bit far from home, aren't we? Her mouth tightened. She knew that tone, the coded suspicion behind the words. She took a steadying breath, her fingers trembling faintly. I just came from the Civic Center. I was the keynote speaker for the Martin Luther King Jr. Gala. Mercer's lip curled. That right? Got any proof? Evelyn's jaw clenched. Officer, I'm Dr. Evelyn Monroe, former Chief Justice of the North Carolina Supreme Court. Her voice was soft but carried the weight of her title. Every syllable a stone in a river that should have stilled him. But instead, Mercer laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. Nice try. Got any ID to back up that little story? Evelyn reached again, slow and deliberate, for her clutch. Step out of the vehicle, Mercer snapped. His hand flew to his holster. The flashlight beam quivered, almost trembling with excitement for the coming escalation. Evelyn stiffened, her heartbeat pounding now. Officer, this is entirely unnecessary. Please call the governor's office. They'll confirm my identity. Mercer's grin turned feral. What's that? You resisting? He yanked the door open with a force that rocked the car. Evelyn's hands shot up instinctively. I am not resisting. I'm asking you to verify before. Before she could finish, he grabbed her arm, twisting it painfully as he dragged her from the car. The gospel music still hummed softly from the speakers, a cruel contrast to the brutality of the moment. Her knees buckled as she hit the pavement, the rough concrete scraping through the fabric of her slacks. The cold bite of metal snapped around her wrists. Officer Mercer, please, she whispered, the words nearly lost in the chaos of the moment. But they didn't care. The storm had already begun. The story of Evelyn Monroe is one of resilience, grit, and truth. A woman framed, a woman silenced, but never truly broken. Stay tuned to find out how Evelyn's fight for justice, against an empire built on lies, would ignite a firestorm that no one could ignore. The cold steel of the handcuffs bit into Dr. Evelyn Monroe's wrists, but she held her head high, refusing to let the sting of humiliation show. Captain Ryan Mercer's grip was tight, but Evelyn's resolve was stronger. The car doors slammed shut, and she was shoved into the back of a police cruiser. The music from the gospel station still faintly echoed in her ears, a reminder of who she was before this storm, and who she would be once it passed. As the cruiser sped toward the station, Evelyn remained silent, her mind already working, calculating, preparing. She had seen this before, how the system twisted and contorted to fit its narrative, how the truth could be buried beneath a mountain of lies. But she wasn't the type to let injustice stand unchallenged. Not after all she'd endured. Not after everything she had built. Back in the heart of Charlotte, the news hit the airwaves like a bombshell. By morning, the headline screamed, "Former Chief Justice arrested in drug bust scandal." The media had a field day. Dr. Evelyn Monroe, a revered icon of justice, the woman who had paved the way for so many, was now being painted as a criminal. The images on the screen showed her being led out of the police car, her silver hair disheveled, her head bowed as if in shame. The lies spread like wildfire. They didn't know her. They didn't understand the depth of what they were about to awaken. Her arrest was a spectacle, designed to break her, to show the world that no one, no matter how high they climbed, was above the reach of the system. But they underestimated her. Hours passed. The cold steel of the holding cell pressed in on Evelyn as she sat, alone on the bench, her thoughts consumed by one singular focus: the truth. She knew how this was going to play out if she did nothing. Her reputation, her career, and her legacy, everything she had fought for, would be destroyed. But she wasn't done fighting. Not yet. A door opened. The clatter of footsteps echoed in the corridor, and a figure stepped inside. It was someone Evelyn had known for years. Someone she trusted. "Dr. Monroe," said the voice, low and steady. It was Clara, her former law clerk, now a top attorney herself. Clara's eyes scanned the cell, then fixed on Evelyn. "Clara," Evelyn said, her voice steady but thick with emotion, "I need your help. They've set me up." "I know," Clara replied, her face tight with concern. "We've been following the case. The evidence they've planted. It's fabricated, Evelyn. I'm already in contact with the governor's office. We'll get you out of here, but we need to move fast." Evelyn nodded, her mind already working, analyzing the situation. "No. It's not enough to get me out. We need to burn this whole thing down. We need to expose them for what they are: liars, manipulators, and abusers of power." Clara paused. "How far are you willing to go?" Evelyn met her gaze. "As far as it takes." The following days were a blur of legal maneuvers, calls to influential allies, and carefully orchestrated leaks to the press. Clara, along with a trusted team of investigators, dug into the police records, the chain of evidence, and the officers involved in the arrest. It wasn't long before they uncovered something shocking. Mercer, the arresting officer, had a history of misconduct. He had been linked to previous false arrests, all swept under the rug. But it wasn't just Mercer. A larger conspiracy was at play. Someone in the system had decided to take down Evelyn, and they had the resources to do it. But they hadn't anticipated Evelyn's resolve. They hadn't realized that she was more than just a former Chief Justice. She was a symbol of resilience, a beacon of hope to the oppressed, and a woman who had faced down corruption her entire life. As the days passed, the pressure mounted. Evelyn's story went viral. Her supporters, both old and new, rallied around her. Protests erupted outside the police station, demanding justice for the woman who had dedicated her life to serving the law. Then came the breaking news. The investigation team had uncovered the truth. The drugs had been planted in Evelyn's car. The arrest was a setup, orchestrated by powerful figures who wanted to silence her. And with that revelation came a flood of support from across the nation. It wasn't just the legal battle that had to be won. It was a war for justice, for truth, and for the honor of a woman who had given everything to make the world a better place. The final showdown came when Evelyn Monroe stood before the court. The atmosphere was charged, electric. She was no longer just a former Chief Justice. She had become the embodiment of resistance, a beacon for those who had been wronged, marginalized, and overlooked. Captain Mercer took the stand, his face pale as he tried to justify his actions. But the truth was already out. The lies had unraveled, and the public was watching. As the evidence against him mounted, it became clear that Mercer had been just a pawn in a larger scheme. But it wasn't just Mercer who would face the consequences. The empire built on lies would crumble, and those who thought they could control the truth were about to learn just how wrong they were. Evelyn stood tall, her silver hair catching the light. She didn't just win the case, she dismantled an entire corrupt system. The truth had been revealed, and justice had been served. As she walked out of the courthouse, the world watched. The cheers from her supporters filled the air, but it was the quiet, resolute smile on Evelyn's face that told the real story. The battle had been long, but in the